honor for me to be in this session to make this presentation as asked by the Attorney General of Cuba. I would like to greet the representatives of the various delegations attending this Congress, which is so important for Cuba and for the region. And as I see, it is a global conference. That makes me very happy because Cuba has actually been a generous country in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of its opening for us to be able to know its law practices, and I'm sure this Congress will benefit a comparative discussion between our various legal models. I would like to thank the Minister of Justice of Cuba, who is a member of our international organization, and of course Claudio Ramos, who is with us today, and all the Cuban officials for the efforts they have made to hold this meeting. Our organization, COMJIB, that's the acronym, is the Conference of Ministers of Justice of Ibero-American countries. It is an international intergovernmental agency headquartered in Madrid, and its regulations are the Madrid Treaty of 1992, which we celebrated recently. We celebrated its first quarter of a century. And all this time, the organization has been able to accrue international legal experiences on public policies. Its two big issues of study and work have been international cooperation for development to strengthen the political role and public policies by justice in Ibero-America, and the second one, I would call it the sharp thorn, let's say, of the organization. I mean, our organization has the capacity of adopting international legal treaties. So we have also developed mechanisms for legal cooperation in the world on topics requiring an approach to struggle international crime and other topics. With that, we've had important information like results at the International Convention on Bioconferences for Legal Systems, treaties on extraditions, and today we are working on one of the most important treaties. We know that Ibero-America is a focus of attention for the international community, and recently we have adopted the final text for the treaty on e-transmissions for international cooperation between the ministries, and that's a great landmark in the transmission and sharing and validation, legally speaking, of information and the immediate legal effects on that, thanks to a digital platform that will be including digital certificates and signatures. So we are about to have in the next heads of state of Ibero-America to be held late last year in Antigua, Guatemala. There, the Ibero-American heads of state will consider the signing of this important treaty. It will leave behind a style of work that dealt only on legal matters, but this new treaty will encompass many matters. And with it, and that's why I'm bringing it up today, the possibility that for the first time, Ibero-Americans can have such a treaty to include activities with countries in other regions that may join us in this platform to convey information. Such an instrument will truly meet the postulates we have been striving for in justice, that is to have agile, swift justice administration, and that internationally puts aside political principles of opportunities conveniences and focuses on procedural agility for persons, on guarantees so that justice is more efficient. Our organization in 2016, as a result of much work with the Sixth Commission of the United Nations in dealing with the legal matters of the organization, started a process to become a permanent observer of the General Assembly. It was granted to us in late 16, and now our Conference of Ministers of Justice is an observer agency of the General Assembly of the UN. With that, we will be playing a greater, more global role, and we will be able to make our regional legal work part of those efforts. We are taking great steps to also have this global voice in the United Nations, the General Assembly. So, within the organization, as decided by the ministers and others in the organization, it has been very important to have an agenda on the commitments we have undertaken as to justice with the United Nations. I will refer to the Sustainable Development Goal 16 of the 2030 Agenda of the UN. It is a goal that, in our view, and after much reflection in 2016 and 17, we have seen as unavoidable goal. The Ibero-American region has already done some things about it. It has drawn our attention very much the possibility that COMJIB adheres to these topics, because many times regional organizations and agencies, and I have seen that in other places, seem to want to have their own specific agenda, and this brings about plots of work and segmentation which are not good for the implementation of the great guidelines of states. For that reason, and specifically because now, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, OAC 16 and other goals state a series of global tasks and indicators. As to indicators, our organization pays much attention to finally being able to define a model or a philosophy of work with results. That's so difficult in the realm of justice because of hermetic historical attitudes. We have even heard things like justice cannot be measured. I think that demystifying these ideas is important so that we can bring about innovative instruments which in the end allow us to measure justice. It is not measuring whether the work by a legal official is good or not. In the end, we will get lost in that cloud and we put aside what's most important, whether there is social satisfaction among the citizens with their justice policies and administrations. That should be the real goal for having measurement tools to measure justice. And we have complementary tools that may help us in that process. A major tool taking into account that we jurists are not the best data collectors because of our training, and it is evident that you read statistics that we are not the best collectors or administrators of data, unlike other professions which include in their training the capacity to have data collection capabilities, that there are important tools. That's why the Conference of Ministers of Justice has approved the first Ibero-American Victimization and Safety Perception and Justice Quality Survey, so that we can understand the data from justice records. If we continue sharing the idea that public policies should focus on persons, and that decision making for designing, developing, monitoring, and evaluating public policies should be based on evidence, then we must be consistent with the idea of improving the quality of decision making data. In that sense, the agenda gives us the challenge of better articulating the whole series of tools we may have to understand the true impact of public policies in the region. There is no public policy, there is no budget of states, nor cooperation, no matter how good they are, economically speaking, that can finance public policies on justice if the state is opaque, if it doesn't act, if there are black holes at some points because resources will not reach their destination. That is why it is important to talk about the rule of the law. That's why it's important to talk about the importance of including the citizens in this new effort so that they participate in the designing of the laws. At least we need to know their perception on justice. This will be a new paradigm in this change of mind, and certainly we will be facing great challenges while trying to have the citizens participate in justice affairs. Recently, there was a World Bank report referring to the law and the rule of law. It is a 2017 report discussing in depth the rule of the law, and in which the rule of law is not just an indicator, but the key concept in the architecture of a public functions administration. It is important to see how this World Bank report, which is called Law and Government, places citizens at the center of everything, and it brings about a debate on what would be the political arena where citizens can play a role within justice systems, how citizens can become legal players within the rule of the law framework. Usually, when you talk about corruption, what you see, and together with it, there is a great media load. What you see is the tip of the iceberg. What you see is a corrupt official. But we haven't been able yet to get into the depths of the endemic evil of corruption. That is why it is important also when we talk about the strengthening of citizens' involvement that we understand that justice includes issues that are negotiable when it comes to cannot be negotiated when it comes to handing down responsibilities, that the Supreme Court must be independent and so on, and there are also legal services we should try to decentralize and then find one of the most important political players in the architecture of states. I'm referring to mayors and city halls. That democratic epicenter where there are great chances and where citizens can play a direct role and where they can be giving shared responsibility to prevent scourges such as corruption is to be found in city halls. That's why it is important that following the logic of this document of 2016, we can understand the relevance of including accountability and of creating efficient institutions at all levels. We're not talking only about the highest level of justice, but of all the levels of public administration where there are things having to do with legal matters. That is why I am sure that according to the 2030 agenda, it will be very important to involve local powers and local governments and understand this work dynamic where citizens can be more directly involved in the prevention of scourges as corruption by using the local governance places. And today I think we can say that practically all laws, at least in in Ibero-America, allow for better roles for the citizens in public affairs related to legal or legal administration. This is a topic we must deal with. Justice, from the traditional viewpoint, is still part of sentencings and lawmaking and higher level definitions, but there are strata in society that should be understood and favored so that they participate in the legal dialogue. I think that's very important and unpostponable. Architects of justice should also understand that you should listen to citizens. I mean, parliamentarians and deputies should also make an effort to understand and know about the ideas of the citizens. I think that is essential. Justice architects, deputies should not be away from the state logics and the general architecture of laws. I particularly like the Peruvian model of the Council of Criminal Policies when it comes to criminal law making. This Council of Peru, which also includes a very important council in Colombia, allows parliamentarians and all the public sector people dealing with the laws to have a previous dialogue, having in mind such an important topic, because in the penal legislation we're discussing the possibility of restricting goods and rights and freedoms of persons, but we are also, from the viewpoint of the victims, we should talk about the possibility of reparations with dignity, any damage caused by a crime. In that balance, it is very important that we don't have random initiatives. That can be dangerous. We must try to have the best possible information so that the lawmakers make decisions focused on a single end, that there is a clear state policy as to where we are going, that there is a debate. And academia, that's what I like about this Peruvian model. With it, academia and think tanks can also generate information mechanisms and bring about opinions and debates. That's very important in these very specific matters. As a story, I can tell that yesterday before I took my plane to fly here in Madrid, I saw a debate of Spanish deputies on permanent imprisonment. It is a complex topic there. It is a polemical issue that has brought about the focus by the citizens. Recently, there have been complex cases as to missing children and assassinations, very specific cases, but they have retaken the debate on permanent imprisonment. And yesterday, they discussed a series of things that are of criminal policy. A couple of days earlier, 100 professors of the law presented a manifesto against permanent imprisonment. But I think that academia should speak up, that officials and prison wardens and psychologists and parole boards should all speak up. There are many players in the criminal law activities, and everybody should participate, including the citizens. Of course, big criminal law decisions are highly specialized and complex, but it drew my attention so much yesterday that they had this debate because they focused on general policy matters and not so much on evidence or information. That's a delicate thing, particularly when you are discussing such a complex matter as an imprisonment term that can be for life or for many years in the case of a person who will be in a prison. Those topics evidence that many a time politicians are carried away by the media or the social ideas and not by the evidence they have before their eyes. Let's hope that these fora and debates also help them to create new formulas for discussion and analysis on the most important and relevant themes. That is why in our organization we are happy to see that it is possible to coordinate our work under this Agenda 2030 that includes many things, 12 global goals that are well defined, but I think that increasingly there is a conviction that we must see to it that we eradicate corruption cases so that we can see legislative and financial and other efforts really bear fruit to the end user, that is, citizens. These efforts will really be made if there is robust lawmaking, if there is a robust legislative system within society. In our organization from COMJIB, we will continue discussing and centering our efforts on keeping a high standard of support to ministers and organizations, and we will continue making efforts. Our organization is privileged. It is uncommon in the sense that I am now speaking to you as Secretary General of the Minister of Justice, but 13 years ago, the Minister of Justice and all Attorney Generals of Ibero-America and all legal powers decided to reach a consensus to create an Ibero-American legal cooperation network we call Iberredes. This network has prompted the writing of this electronic cooperation treaty that I referred to initially, and with it, the General Secretary can also be the Secretary General of this Ibero-American Cooperation Network. It is rather weird because I am the Secretary General of two different things, but in the end, the purpose of this organization is to have that ability to reach out and have a political dialogue at the highest level with the main decision makers of justice in Latin America. Not all competencies are symmetrical. There are many asymmetries in between the competences of the attorney generals and the ministries of justice and the and others. But generally, our organization provides space for discussion, for harmony, for dialogue, for advancement, for discussion, and for attaining tangible products, as some of the tweets I have mentioned, which are intended to go beyond things and support the efforts in public policy making. I would like to conclude by saying that I coincide fully with Moreno's view, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, when he says that the agenda for the next 10 years internationally on justice includes two items. First, digitalization of justice, and two, the agenda against corruption. If we realize, if we are more digitalized, and if we are more agile, and if we are more efficient, we will realize that we will have more transparency. That's great, and that transparency will be the key for fighting corruption. That is why these two lines are intercommunicated intrinsically. Digitalization of justice on one hand and the struggle against corruption on the other, at the end will have the same path, and they will be indivisible. In this very aging agenda, our organization is working, trying to create a digitalization process so as to improve the efficiency and the political role of justice administrations. We know that there are big efforts being made and that the fora of the main decision makers in Iberoamerica, like IAN and the Ibero-American Legal Summit, are making great efforts also to make headway along this agenda. They have their own agendas, but in the end, we have tacit or explicit and manifest consensus to find these tools that allow us to make our work more transparent and more efficient. We cannot continue having great burdens of saturation of the legitimacy of our legal systems because that brings about impunity in the end. It brings about lack of trust among the citizens in their institutions. We must make great efforts in mediation, in conciliation, in everything that really allows us not to take all social conflicts to the framework of the law. Not only because it is expensive in the final analysis, it is much more bureaucratic, and what you see in society is a feeling of lack of satisfaction. There are fiscal and legal delays, and that takes makes people forget about justice to solve their conflicts, and in the end, there is a divorce between the two great pillars, the citizens and the rule of the law. That's why I believe that this kind of conferences where we, as various officials, can discuss and speak more freely are important because in a way it is a contribution to this effort we are leading from various positions to improve lawmaking and justice in our region. I do not know how much time left I have. I know we have a busy schedule today, and I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of information, but I would like to leave you with some topics which have an impact. I will not want to get entangled with very highly specialized matters. There are many experts here who will make great contributions, and then we will read their presentations. But I'll refer to several topics having an impact as to where Ibero-American justice could be heading to leave a legacy. Usually in Ibero-America, we say that our DNA includes human rights. In a way, we do have arguments to say that in Ibero-America we have been able to eradicate internal conflicts and wars in Central America. We are scared of those phantoms and sad burdens that brought mourning to our region because of armed conflicts. Colombia is a step away from completely eradicating the longest internal war of the region, civil war of the region. Many times we say we have good democracy that can be exported, but actually there are citizens who are working and migrating from our countries who cannot vote from abroad because it is not possible to vote from abroad. So what democracy, absolute democracy are we talking about? There are many immigrants who are living in friendly nations who have opened up the doors to them and whose future is uncertain in terms of their pensions, what they call the future deficit in some places. Many migrants arrive in other countries and they do not know what will their future will be like when they become elderly persons. These are big issues, and organizations like ours should discuss them. I come from a nation where we still have in the Constitution the death penalty. I don't like it, and I am ashamed of that. We have it in Guatemala. I hope one day we can say that Ibero-American is free from the death penalty. That's my longing, and I hope that day comes soon, because then we will really be able to restate all the things that would place us in a region whose DNA really includes human rights. I hope that these big impact issues, like the one that citizens can return to their homes when they want to, with guarantees that the migrants know that they can vote from other countries, that migrants know that they can have adequate pensions in their elderly lives, that there is no death penalty in Latin America, and so on. I think these are the big challenges that I myself would like to hand down to my daughter and to the younger generation, that we can hand them down with a certain future with guarantees where the rule of the law is a fact.